The story will be told from the perspective of the main female character.
Your sister needs a place to work to develop her personal brand, not someone to live with. My father didn't even bother to stand up when he told me. He just sat in his chair, swirling a glass of very expensive wine. I was standing right there in the entryway, holding an envelope with 2 luxury cruise tickets I had purchased for my parents. He spoke in a bored tone, saying that my sister was actually doing something meaningful with her life. He looked at me and said I was 28 years old and nothing but a burden. He told me to get my junk out of his house and said he didn't care if I ended up on the streets. He even joked that the freezing air outside might finally wash the unhappy look off my face. I looked past him into the area that used to be my bedroom. It had been completely gutted. The walls were covered in fresh, bright pink paint that was still wet. My old desk was gone, replaced by professional ring lights and camera gear. Everything I owned had been shoved into 3 black trash bags that were piled on the floor. I didn't yell or start crying. I simply placed the cruise tickets on the table in the hallway, a quiet reminder of the vacation they were never going to take. Then I picked up my bags and walked out into the cold night without uttering a single word. I got into my old, beat-up car and drove through the heavy snow until I spotted a motel with a flashing sign on the side of the highway. The heater in the vehicle made a loud rattling noise and barely blew any warm air on my frozen hands. It was actually perfect. My parents always hated this car and told me it was an eyesore in their driveway. They had no idea I drove it on purpose to hide the truth about myself. As I sat on the uncomfortable motel bed listening to the wind outside, I thought about the root of all my problems. My father always referred to it as the $4.5 million mistake. It happened back in 2001 when I was only 5 years old. He had a major meeting scheduled with some investors to get in early on a tech startup. However, that morning I woke up with a fever of 104 and had a seizure. He had to miss that meeting to take me to the emergency room. That company eventually exploded in value, and the people who made it to that meeting became incredibly wealthy. My father was not one of them. He never let me forget it. Every year after I blew out my birthday candles, he would look at me with pure resentment and tell me I cost him $4.5 million. He said I started my life with a negative balance. To him, I wasn't a daughter. I was just a failed investment. This anger turned into what I called the parasite tax. Ever since I turned 17, I had to pay rent to stay in my own home. My father took a portion of every paycheck I earned from my part-time jobs, calling it interest on the debt I owed him. But the money wasn't just for rent. I was actually paying for my sister's lifestyle. She was seen as the family asset while I was the liability. When my sister wanted to try modeling, I paid for her professional photos. When she decided to be an influencer, my mother told me I had to pay for her lip fillers and expensive spa visits. She said my sister needed to look a certain way to marry a rich man. They took my money every month and told me I should be thankful they hadn't kicked me out sooner. They looked at my baggy hoodies and my messy hair and thought I was a loser. They thought I was a woman who barely got by doing small freelance jobs. They were completely wrong. I pulled my laptop out of my bag and set it on the small motel desk. The outside of the computer was scratched up, but the hardware inside was top of the line. My family thought I fixed office printers for a living. They didn't know that I was actually a high-level financial fixer for big venture capital firms. When a company is losing money or lying about their finances, the investors hire me. I track down stolen money and find hidden assets. I find the corruption in the books and remove it. I am very good at what I do, and I charge a lot of money for it. Last year my basic salary was $610,000, and that didn't even count my bonuses. I had enough money to buy their house 3 times over in cash. I could have paid off their entire mortgage in one day, but I chose not to. I kept my money hidden in various offshore accounts and different investments. I intentionally wore cheap clothes and drove a rusty car because I knew that if my parents realized how much I was actually worth, they wouldn't just take my money, they would destroy me for it. I sat there in that dark room, the blue light from the screen hitting my face. They thought they had just thrown away a piece of garbage. They had no clue they had just started a war with a woman who ruins financial criminals for a living. I had to get back to work. Focusing on my job was the only thing that felt right while my world was falling apart. I reached into my bag to grab my computer, but something felt wrong. The bag was far too light. My heart sank and I felt a wave of dizziness. I emptied the entire bag onto the motel bed, finding only some cables and an external drive. The matte black laptop that held my entire professional life was missing. I tried to stay calm and pulled out my phone to use the tracking app. A small blue light appeared on the map. It wasn't at my parents' house. It was 3 miles away at a place called Quick Cash Pawn on 5th Street. I drove there in a total daze through the slushy snow. Inside, the shop smelled like old dust. I showed my ID to the man behind the glass and gave him the serial number for my machine. He didn't even look up from what he was reading. He told me he couldn't release it without the pawn ticket or a police report that would take weeks to process. I rushed back to my car, opened the trunk, and pulled out the 3 trash bags my father had thrown at me. I ripped them open right there in the parking lot, throwing my clothes and books around in the freezing wind. Finally, I found it, a wrinkled yellow receipt covered in coffee stains, tucked inside a pair of my jeans. My mother hadn't just packed my things, she had robbed me. I went back inside, handed over the paper, and paid $750 to get my own property back. As I sat in my car holding the cold laptop, a second alert appeared on my phone. It was an email from the DMV about a transfer of liability. I stared at the screen in disbelief. My car, which I had bought with my own cash years ago, but kept in my father's name to save on insurance, had been sold online just 3 hours earlier. The time on the sale was 20 minutes before I had even arrived at the house to talk to them. My father had used the spare key to hand the car over to a buyer while he was busy kicking me out. A $34,000 asset was gone in an instant. I immediately called my mother. She picked up and sounded annoyed that I was bothering her. I told her they had stolen my computer and sold my car. She didn't deny it. Instead, she snapped that they had raised me for 18 years and that I should consider the laptop a small payment toward the debt I owed them. She claimed my sister's party planner needed a deposit and told me I could just buy a new computer since I was single and didn't have many bills. Then she hung up on me. I sat in the silence of that parking lot as the snow continued to fall. Something inside me finally shifted. I stopped being the daughter who just wanted her family to love her. I wiped away my last tear and opened the laptop. I was now the professional auditor, the woman who destroys people for hiding the truth. I didn't need to cry. I needed to look at the numbers. I didn't sleep that night. The motel room was freezing because the heater had stopped working, but the cold kept me sharp. I logged into my private databases, tools that weren't available to regular people. First, I tracked the sale of my car. My father had listed it on a quick sale site for only $7,200. It was a steal for the buyer, but a crime for him. I followed the money trail and saw it went directly to a high-end party planning business. He sold my car just to pay for a chocolate fountain and ice carvings for my sister's big event. I dug deeper into my parents' financial records. I expected to find they were struggling, but what I found was much worse. Their finances were completely ruined. They had refinanced the family home 3 times in 5 years and had maxed out every credit card they owned. Most importantly, I found a legal notice of default from a month ago. They were only 30 days away from losing the house to the bank. I needed more than just a foreclosure to get back at them. I needed evidence of a crime. I couldn't hack the bank, but I knew my father was greedy and arrogant. I called an attorney named Mr. Harrison who owed me a big favor. I told him I needed to set up a shell company called Summit Capital that looked like a high-end investment firm. I asked him to call my father and offer a deal to help support my sister's career. My father fell for it instantly. He replied to the email in minutes, bragging about how my sister was going to be a global star. Mr. Harrison asked him for his most recent loan application to verify his assets. My father sent the document right away. I opened the PDF and scrolled down to the income section. He had listed himself as earning $85,000, but he listed my sister as earning $190,000 from social media partnerships. It was a total lie. My sister didn't make a dime. My father had lied to a bank to get a loan, which is a federal crime that carries a massive prison sentence and a $950,000 fine. I saved the file to 3 different servers. He had no idea he had just handed me the weapon I needed to end him. The attorney called my father the next morning to finalize the meeting. He told my parents that the silent partner, a mysterious tech investor, was in town for only 1 day and wanted to sign the documents in person. He made a point to ask that my sister be present, hinting that the investor was a fan of her online image. My sister suddenly perked up and asked if he had seen her latest video, bragging that it had already hit 4,000 views. The attorney assured her he had seen everything. They fell for the trap immediately because their vanity made them blind. I arrived at the law firm an hour early. I didn't go through the front doors. Instead, I took a private elevator to the executive floor. The attorney met me and handed me a key card to the observation room. I sat in the dark, watching the security cameras as my family walked in. My father and mother were dressed in their best clothes. My father wore a suit that was a bit too tight, and my mother was wearing a new dress that she probably bought with the money from my car sale. My sister followed them in, wearing big sunglasses and looking bored while she tapped on her phone. They sat down at a long, expensive table. When the attorney offered them champagne, my father acted like he owned the place. He swirled his glass, looking just as arrogant as he did on the night he kicked me out. He started bragging about his empire and how my sister's career was about to take off. My mother asked when the money would be transferred. The attorney told them the funds would be released as soon as the papers were signed, but he mentioned that the investor required a personal guarantee. My father just laughed and said they were a solid family with a brand that was going to the moon. He didn't even look at the contract. He didn't skim the pages or check the fine print. He just saw a chance for fame and money. He signed his name, my mother signed hers, and my sister signed as a witness. They thought they were signing a loan to save their lives. In reality, they were walking into a legal trap I had built. Hidden deep in the paperwork on page 42 was clause C7, which stated that if any information on the application was a lie, the loan would default immediately. On page 51, there was a deed in lieu of foreclosure. This meant that if they defaulted, the title of the house would automatically transfer to the lender, Summit Capital. There would be no court case and no way to fight it. They had just signed their home over to me while drinking my champagne. In the dark room, I stood up and fixed my blazer. I didn't look like the girl who had been crying in the snow a few days ago. I looked like a woman in control. I walked down the hallway toward the conference room. It was time to finish this. Inside the room, the attorney gathered the papers and tapped them into a neat pile. He told them that the funds would be ready soon, but first, the silent partner wanted to say a few words. My father leaned back in his chair, acting smug. He said he would love to shake the hand of a man who knew a good investment when he saw one. The attorney stepped aside and I pushed the heavy doors open. I wasn't wearing an old hoodie or thrift store jeans. I was wearing a charcoal suit that was perfectly tailored. My hair was pulled back and I looked professional and cold. My father's smile disappeared instantly. My mother looked like she couldn't believe what she was seeing. My sister finally stopped looking at her phone when the room went dead silent. My father stammered, asking how I got past security. He told the attorney that I was his struggling daughter, who was probably there to beg for money. He even told the attorney to call security to throw me out. The attorney didn't move. He just snapped his briefcase shut with a sound that was as loud as a gunshot. I told my father that wouldn't be necessary. My voice was calm, the same voice I use when I'm taking down a corrupt company. I walked to the front of the table and stood over him. I pulled the wrinkled yellow pawn ticket from my pocket and smoothed it out on the wood. I told my mother that I had bought my laptop back that morning. Then I told them that I had bought something else too. My father stood up, his face turning red, and told me to get out. I didn't raise my voice. I gave him a look that made him sit right back down. I told the attorney to show them the new acquisition. The lights dimmed and the projector showed a property deed. The previous owners were listed as my parents, and the new owner was Summit Capital. My father started shaking, saying he didn't understand and that it was just a loan document. I looked him in the eye and told him it wasn't a loan anymore. It was a transfer of ownership. I looked at my father and told him very clearly, I am the owner of Summit Capital. He had just signed his own house over to me. My mother started panicking and shouting that what I did was illegal, but I just changed the slide on the wall. I pointed at the specific line where my father had claimed my sister earned $190,000 a year. I told them that we all knew my sister actually made $0. I explained that providing false information to a bank is federal bank fraud under Title 18 United States Code, Section 1344. I told him the penalty was up to 30 years in federal prison and a $950,000 fine. Then I pointed to Clause C7 regarding cross-default and Clause D1, which states that upon default, the deed held in escrow is released to the lender immediately. Because of those terms, the house became my property the very second the ink dried. I leaned over the table and gave them an ultimatum. I told them they had exactly 72 hours to pack their things and get out of my house. I warned them that if they weren't gone by then, or if they broke a single thing inside the home, I would hand all the evidence of their fraud over to the government. My father looked small and defeated. He realized too late that he wasn't just playing a game against his daughter, he was playing against the house, and the house always wins. They actually left. Fear was a better motivator than love ever was. 3 days later, the home was completely empty. I hired people to clear out everything they left behind, and I handled the final numbers myself. I wrote them a check for their relocation, but only after I did the math. I subtracted the value of the car they stole from me, the $750 I paid to get my laptop back, and every cent of rent they had charged me since I was 17. The final check I gave them was tiny, barely enough to cover a deposit on a cheap 2-bedroom apartment. Life changed quickly for them. My father ended up working as a greeter at a hardware store for a minimum wage. My mother spent her days staring at the walls of a rental house she despised. My sister's influencer career evaporated the moment my money stopped flowing. She had to start selling her designer purses online just to afford groceries. It turns out that internet likes don't pay the bills. Before I put the house on the market, I walked through it one last time. The rooms felt smaller than I remembered. I stopped at the door of my old bedroom, which was still painted that bright neon pink. I didn't bother repainting it. I left it exactly as it was, a loud, ugly reminder of their greed. Then I walked out, locked the front door, and listened to the click of the lock. It was a clean and final sound. I walked to my new car, which was registered in my own name this time. I took out my phone and went to my contacts. One by one, I blocked my father, my mother, and my sister. I didn't need to say goodbye or have a big emotional talk. The silence was worth every penny I spent. I realized that family isn't about sharing the same blood, it's about respect. And if people can't afford to give you that, they don't deserve to be in your life. Leave a comment and let me know where you are listening from. I want to see how far this story goes.